Hi, it's Kayla, and today's video is one that I've wanted to make for a while now. As a Filipino American who's part of the LGBTQ+ community, I felt so much pride in the fact that a good number of promising BLs have come out of the Philippines within the past year, and many of them are not your typical production. More than ever, we saw shows being created by queer writers, directors, and producers. This is something that I feel is important to highlight, and so I'm finally here to talk about some of my favorite Filipino BLs of 2020, in no particular order. But let's jump into it. So the first series I want to highlight is one that made me genuinely laugh and smile all throughout it, and that's Boys Lockdown. In my opinion, this was one of the best written and produced BLs to come out of the Philippines last year. What I loved about this series was the lighthearted but sincere relationships between the characters, whether it was friend groups, family members, or the main couple, Key and Chen. Their fated meeting in the drugstore went beyond the usual soulmates trope. It had this added layer of humor to it that carried over into their boyfriend dynamic. I really enjoyed watching them figure out how to be together while being apart, and the enthusiasm they had to make things work despite the restrictions they faced. That kind of effort is true love. I also loved Ate Libby and was honestly in total understanding of her character. Getting to see a more vulnerable side of her after she's been painted as this martyr of resilience felt very symbolic to me. The worries she had about the gas delivery and Chen's well-being served as reminders of how the pandemic has affected people's financial stability and mental health. Although most of this series is upbeat and playful, I appreciated that the director didn't try to romanticize the serious nature of what's been happening in the world. I'd give this BL 5 out of 5 dick masks. Next, I want to highlight a small production that created a big stir, and that's Quarren Things. This indie BL was so well scripted and executed that you barely notice those more amateurish details like Judah's edited laptop screen. What I loved about this series was the acting, that raw emotion that Kyo and Royce brought to their characters. A good script is one thing, but having someone that can effectively deliver it is a whole other story. When they cried, I cried with them. Their frustration and sadness was so tangible and honestly super realistic. No matter how different they were in personality or wealth, I came to sympathize with them both. And so I would say the most cohesive parts of this series were its writing and talent. Another thing I loved about the writing was how it managed to be socially conscious without feeling too preachy. Judah is what you would call a woke king, while Rocky seems disinterested in political correctness. Their dynamic felt very familiar because it was a reflection of an evolving society and this younger generation that's steering us towards change. The social commentary we get from Judah is not just timely, but intentional considering all the political unrest that has been occurring due to each country's handling of the pandemic. I'd give this BL 4.5 out of 5 sardines. This one may be a little unexpected, but I really want to highlight the mystical thriller that is Cheat the series. As an actual witch, I find anything that centers around ritualistic magic so fascinating, and I'm always eager to see how it's depicted. What I loved about this series was the exploration of dark magic and the power that sex holds over people. When they said intended for mature audiences, they meant it. This story is driven by sex, and as you can guess, cheating. Unlike many BLs, these scenes do have a purpose. They show the jealousy, desperation, and passion that comes with sexual discovery and unrequited love. There's also this theme of immorality and the role that religion plays in self-acceptance, which I think is very daring for a predominantly Catholic country. This series is the definition of camp. Camp just refers to something that's exaggerated and theatrical, often in relation to gay or pop culture. The intense color symbolism, the shaky camera work, the over-dramatized dialogue, all of that was what made it fun to watch. I was so entertained by the tackiness of it, and I mean that so lovingly. Imagine American Horror Story, except low budget and in Tagalog. The plot has more twists twists and turns than a bag of pretzels, and I guarantee you'll be salty at some point. I'd give this BL 4 out of 5 candlesticks. I've seen mixed reviews on this series, but I personally enjoyed it more than I expected, and that's Ben and Jim. Maybe I missed something, but it seems like people have really strong opinions about this one. What I loved about this series was the plot. This story of childhood friends that grow apart until fate brings them back together. I'm a sucker for that trope, I must admit. The connection I felt to Ben's character was unreal. Even during those moments where he was acting bratty or condescending, I understood that it was coming from a place of hurt. Because I related to him so much, I was left feeling emotionally drained after that last episode. Jim is also a character that I shared many thoughts with, especially his fears over coming out to his girlfriend and father. I would definitely categorize this series as slow burn. There's a steady build-up in tension between Ben and Jim that perfectly shows their deep love for one another. And this build-up coincides directly with Ben's favorite constellation, Vela, and the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, which is considered a heroic tale. When you keep this in mind, you start to notice the similarities between that myth and this story that's being told. The events that unfold are a lot more calculated than they appear at first glance. I'd give this BL a 4 out of 5 e-scooters. Now this next BL is one that you guys have been dying for me to talk about, and that's Mr. Juan Severo's series, Like in the Movies. I think most people would agree. This is a high quality show, and there isn't a single thing I would change about it. What I loved about this series was the complexity of Carl and Vlad's relationship. They differed a lot in maturity level, and that created a point of conflict right away. Carl is introduced as this kid who's trying to mark his own path in the world, all while struggling with a fear of being judged. Vlad, however, is introduced as this guy who's confident in his potential and unafraid to go after his heart's desires, whether that involves decisions in his career or the pursuit of a love interest. This dynamic that Paulo and Ian were able to pull off is what made the story so good. This series is living proof that LGBTQ+ stories are best told by queer people, and that might seem self-explanatory, but when you consider BL as a genre, this isn't typically what we get. The line between BL and queer media has been shrinking over the past year, and I do think Like in the Movies played a significant role in merging the two. It's not just some throwaway series that was fun to watch. It helped to destigmatize gay stereotypes and boost Filipino voices within the LGBTQ+ community. I'd give this BL a 5 out of 5 pancakes. If you know me, you know I have to include this final show. It was a game changer for Filipino BL and the subgenre of quarantine media. Of course, I'm referring to Game Boys from the Idea First company. What I loved about this series was everything. The plot's execution, the characters' relatability, the poignant script writing, the masterful cast and crew. I could go on for days about all the things I thought they did right. Above all, I was touched by Cairo's story of coming out, running away, and losing his father to COVID. And after all that, finding comfort in Gabriel. Much like Boys Lockdown, I appreciate how they handled the devastating reality of the pandemic, and because they were the first to tackle it in such a way, I have to applaud them. A big aspect that set Game Boys apart for me was the fandom. Their kindness and inclusivity has made such an impact on not just my content, but my everyday life. Reacting to that pilot episode, I never expected to be joining this wonderful, beautiful family. I'm so grateful for all the people I've met and for all the opportunities I've received because of this series. Fandom isn't always a deciding factor in how much you end up loving a show, but with Game Boys, it helped me to understand the story and characters in a way that I wouldn't have been able to by myself. I'd give this series 10 out of 5 plasma discs. So those were my favorite Filipino BLs of 2020. Quite a few came out, which is why it took me so long to make this video, but the ones I've mentioned were definitely the highlights for me. Moving forward, I hope to see more Filipino creatives producing BL content because if we've learned anything, it's that they are a force to be reckoned with. Anyway, thank you to the moon and back for watching. I do recommend all these shows if you haven't seen them already. And if you have, what were your thoughts? Are there any shows I didn't mention that you found entertaining? We all have different tastes, and so I'm always curious to hear from you guys. Well, that's it for now. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, goodbye!